All right. Well, we want to welcome everybody to the Metaphysical Mysteries Podcast. We got Tom and Terry here hosting, and we have a guest here with us for today, Gwendolyn Natusch. She is a shaman. And for those of you who have no idea what that is, you're going to find out today. So, what is the Metaphysical Mysteries Podcast all about? Well, of course, it's the most exciting time of your day. That's number one. And Tom and I try to explore all those things that are beyond physical, the things that bridge science as well as spirituality and everything in between. I think that as we go through these, we're going to have lots of different guests coming from both sides of that, spirituality as well as science, and we're going to try to do our very best to bring that information to you in a way that's succinct, a little bit fun, and also has a lot of good quality information behind all the science. So, Tom, you got anything to start out with?
Yeah, no, I'm just excited to get this off the ground and get it rolling. This is our inaugural podcast. It's really exciting that Gwen has decided to join us in this endeavor to help us kick this off. And we're really looking forward to what she has to share with all of us today.
Very good. Hey, Gwen, let's just do introductions so people know kind of who you are, where you're from, that kind of thing, and then we'll get rocking and rolling on the topic.
Sure. I'm Gwendolyn Natusch. For a lot of my life, I was an educator, as a special needs educator, and began practicing shamanism in 1989 as a personal spiritual practice. And when I retired as an educator, little did I know that I would be called to become a shamanic practitioner. I never dreamed of being that, never even occurred to me. So I was quite surprised. And so I began the path, in a larger way as a healing person, a medicine person. And before that, it had been a personal spiritual path that I have lived for many, many years, over 3 decades. And so I've been had a shamanic healing practice now for about a decade. And I am in New Bern, North Carolina. Due to COVID, I had a brick and mortar, I had a center, which is now closed, and the center is now a virtual center, which is great. And so I do offer, shaman healing and all of those wonderful things that shamans do, ceremony and land clearing and house clearing. And I also was trained for 4 years as a medium. So I also do intuitive readings and those kinds of things.
Very good.
So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, in a nutshell. Well, I can say from personal experience, having experienced some of Gwen's mediumship, excellent, absolutely excellent. She knows exactly what she's doing. And, it's an interesting field, that in and of itself. But as it relates to a shaman, I mean, what is the history of shamanic practices? How far back in history does that actually go? And what's the American shaman actually look like?
Oh, that's great questions. So, some in the field would argue, it began 10,000 years ago. And some would say, it began 40,000 years ago. And I say it began the minute man stepped on Earth, whatever creation story you want to follow with that one. Because the practice of shamanism, we have a title or a name for it now, but it's as organic as breathing. So I think it's been with man since the beginning. And so what was your second question?
What is obviously we're in America, so what's the American shamanistic movement, or if there is such, or how many people even does this kind of work? I mean, I don't think people know exactly what they do, and even more so, after you explain that, why would I come to you for your practice? I mean.
Yeah, great. Well, I love this question because what a modern day shamanic practitioner looks like is they look like just you or me. Right? And the reason I think it's funny to talk about it is because sometimes people think that, they've seen a lot of pictures in maybe National Geographic or in documentaries of shamans, and they look very different than we do, right? So I've been trained in 3 different shamanic frameworks. And one of them is Siberian shamanism. And one of the things that, we learn about in that is we make our tools, our healing tools. And one of the tools is to create what is called a shamanic eye curtain. So it's literally like fringe over your eyes, has a very specific purpose. And that purpose is that you see both worlds. You see the invisible world behind the eye curtain, and you also see ordinary reality, which is everyday life. You see your client sitting across from you and that kind of a thing. And so I think it's funny, because if I dressed like that, it would probably scare the bejeebies out of people. If I came in like the traditional kind of ancient shamanic clothing, I probably would have very few clients. So the modern day shaman looks just like the modern day, chiropractor, the modern day dentist. They, just look like we do. And shamanism is nothing if it isn't brought into modernity as a living way of healing and working with individuals.
So I think that people think of shaman as like some kind of a Native American medicine man. Is that what it is, or?
Yeah, it is that. So, around the globe, we find shamanism. And so this is really sort of a multi-tiered answer to this question. So the shaman shaman, medicine person, they're basically the same thing.
Okay.
Right? So we have shamanism and medicine peoples all over the globe. And when we look at them from the outside, they all look different. They look really different. Like, why in Peru are they doing, this dance? And why are they using these tools? And why are they working with these animals, right? And then you go to Siberia and you're like, well, why is the seal so important to them? And, why are they wearing these clothing, these pieces of clothing? And it's all based on the culture and the environment that shamanism grows out of. So in shamanism, we work very much with the environment, with the plants, with the animals, with the elements. And so what you find in the environment in Siberia is very, very different than what you'll find in South Africa, let's say. And so looking on the surface of it, it looks like they're 2 very, very different things. But in shamanism, we can actually, to know if it's shamanism, you can find some basic core pieces that are found in every shamanic group or peoples. And so that's how we know that it's shamanism. And I think with medicine peoples, there are different things besides shamanism as well. But you also find in those other healing medicine peoples similar things.
Okay. Well, so who would come to a shaman, and for what reason would they come to a shaman?
Yeah. Any reason, really. So they can come for, I can't find the love of my life. I keep ending up in the same relationship. They can come for physical illness. They can come to deal with depression, a sense of emptiness in their life. They can come for anything.
Okay.
As a shamanic practitioner, I don't diagnose. I'm not a physician. I'm not trained as a physician. I have very clear ethical boundaries about that. But I deal in soul healing, which is very different.
Mm-hmm.
It impacts the physical, very deep level, but we don't come from that place. Like as physicians do, where we diagnose and then we work with the body. No, we work on what I call the energetic field, or in the energetic field, or on the energetic level, so that I'm actually working in a person's energy field.
Mm-hmm. So from a scientific point of view, I mean, we would maybe call that an auric field, or something to that nature. They say there's 7 layers to that energy field. I think modern science is obviously picking up on that now, but this is ancient stuff that, medicine men and women from the old times knew that this was a possibility. And well, obviously, if they broke their leg, they couldn't go to a modern ER and get their leg set. I mean, somebody had to help them at the physical level.
Yes, absolutely.
You're working at kind of the spiritual. I always tell people there's, 3 different kinds of bodies. You've got your, number 1, your physical body, number 2, your emotional, mental body, and then lastly is your spiritual body. And then you start at the top there and affect that, then the rest of them, like a waterfall down the line, they get affected as well.
That's right. I agree with you. And the words that I use for it is that when I work on the energetic level for a client, I'm actually going to the blueprint.
Yeah.
Right? The blueprint of perfection, really. We're born as souls in this perfect state. And we come into human incarnation and we kind of dust it all up purposefully, for our own evolution, our own exploration. And so the work that I do, I really see it as going to that blueprint with a little broom. Mm-hmm. We clear it out or clear it away, transform it. And the perfection, the original design now can come through and manifest in your life and in your body and in your heart and in your mind.
Okay. Well, I kind of live in the Bible Belt in beautiful Southern Illinois. Tom's over in Boston, so we come from kind of a different cultural perspective. And from the to the Bible, it's a Judeo-Christian world as far as America goes. How would you relate what this does to things that may be wrote about, documented in the Bible with healings and so forth that maybe Jesus did or the apostles or whoever? Is there some correlation?
Oh, a lot of people say Jesus was a shaman.
Yep,
when you start reading through the Bible, you're like, oh, wow, look at that. I recognize that. Mm-hmm. So I think anyone who really is doing healing work, authentically doing healing work, they're doing healing work. We can name it, we can put a label on it and a description on it, but I think it all comes from the same place. Right. And I think, people feel comfortable with their own definitions, with their own kind of tools, and I think that's all great. But I think what Jesus did, he said, what was it, Terry? The quote, even greater, you shall do even greater works than I, right?
Yeah. Basically, what I do, you shall do in greater.
Right. Yeah. So I kind of see it that, he was on the world stage, right? He was the Christ on the world stage saying, we can heal and you can witness the healing through me and you shall take this and you shall heal,
Giving you encouragement to do it yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Which is when I do healing work, the work that I do in my sessions with clients is really based on the Peruvian shamanism. And in that sort of cosmology and way of looking at the world, they believe that we are comprised in our energy field of beliefs, which are patterns of energy that either serve us or they don't. Okay. So we can have experiences in life that we either react to or that we respond to. So the experiences that we respond to generally are beautiful experiences that affirm us. I got an award at work and they threw a dinner for me and they gave me, this plaque, and they applauded me and they recognized me. And I walk away from that experience feeling affirmed and stronger. And it's the same if we have an experience that is traumatic, hurtful, confusing, creates a dilemma. Only we walk away with a reaction. And in both of these scenarios, we create stories about ourselves and about the world. And so if I walk away from a traumatic or a hurt situation, I have a story that does not serve me. I have sort of a contract within me. This happened, and so I'm this, and then this awful thing is always going to happen to me. Right. And so in the work that I do, I'm working on the energetic level in someone's energy field transforming those stories, those beliefs.
Absolutely. And I always tell people the only way you can be affected by an input is you have to apply a value to it or an emotion to it to make it something positive or negative, your choice. Yeah, when somebody says, hey, your cat just died, well, then you have to assign a value to that. That's very, very valuable to me. And we'll see, I want to assign emotion. I feel very sad or angry, however the case may be. But if your neighbor who doesn't care for your cat heard the same thing, he or she is not going to necessarily have that same value or emotion tied to the cat. So we do it to ourselves. And I think there's where a shaman can come in and identify what you decided for yourself and change that. Is that about right?
It is. And actually I work with the clients so that they really identify it too. And they're like, yeah. I just help them sort of with the verbiage so we can get clear about what the contract is, because it's a contract.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Tom, I was going to say, Tom does a lot of trauma, and he's a clinician in that area. So Tom, does this sound familiar, just with different labels?
Yeah, very much so. You're right. It's all very subjective how we interpret the experience, and that really dictates the impact on our lives. One of the analogies that I like to use is it's like setting a macro in a computer. Right? You have these little sub-programs within there. And when you have different experiences, it turns these programs on and you start to have reactions. And half the time you don't even realize you're doing it. It just happens because it's already been set, but it's at a subconscious level. You're not even aware it's happening. And so you see people with overreactions at times, or maybe they're just upset and you're going, what was that all about? That wasn't a big deal. It wasn't the incident of today. It was the sub-program that was started up, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah.
So if somebody was going to come in and they said, hey, I don't know really what's wrong with me. I'm depressed. I'm just depressed. I just don't want to get out of bed in the morning. I just don't want to do anything. Life's not going really well. How do you approach that as a shamanic practitioner?
Yeah, I would ask them, well, what's happening in your life? What's going on? What's preoccupying your mind? What emotional state keeps coming to you, right? And they'll say, well, this or that, and we'll figure out what the belief is together. And what I say is that you don't have to look far. We don't have to dig into the unconscious. All we have to do is look at your life, because the wounds are patterns, and they rise in the circumstances in your life over and over and over, just different circumstances, right? And some of us wake up and say, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm noticing this has been happening over and over again. I think I want to change it. And so with the shamanic work, which is energy work, we work with the chakras. I work with the chakras. I work with the soul. And we work on this pattern. And there's a belief at the core of that pattern. And once you've dismantled the belief and clear the emotions, which is what we do in the first part of the session, we clear the emotions of it, which is really the charge that's sort of the impetus of the whole thing. We clear those out of the chakras. And then I do some really interesting things. I look for, and the thing is to come to this work, you don't have to believe anything I say or do when you're on the table, because the work will work. So the first thing we do is we identify the belief. What is the belief? What are the emotions, that you keep feeling over and over and over again? We clear the chakras. And then I look at their energy field, because as a shamanic practitioner, I'm also a seer. I can see energy. I can feel energy. I work with guides. And if I'm not feeling it or seeing it, my guides will tell me what's there. And so the first thing after clearing the chakras is I look for what is called crystallized energies, which is energy of wounds, hurts, that have become more physical in the energy field. And I find them and I clear them. And often what I find when I find the crystallized energy, which are imprints in the luminous energy field at the time of death in a past life. So then they hang around until we heal the pattern, until we heal the belief, until we transform that. And so I go in and I can see what it is. It's usually something to do with how they died. It's either a weapon or a disease, right, that they've died from. And so I'll see that. So I know that that's the object, that's the crystallized energy that I need to remove out of their energy field. And then my guides show me the whole past life. And I can say, this is how you manifested the circumstances of this pattern, this belief in this life. And this was the belief that imprinted into your energy field as an energetic pattern in your energy field. And I clear it, and I'll go to the next one. Usually there's 2 to 4 crystallized energies.
Well, a couple of things I want to point out is you said the word chakras. Now, for some people listening, they may not actually understand what the heck a chakra is, but basically it's energy centers, within the body, outside the body, within close proximity, that provide different kinds of input into the field. So I think people need to kind of know maybe where they're located, what they really are. And then you also talked a little bit about past lives. And for some folks, that's going to be a little outside their box and haven't really thought much about that. And we want to talk a little bit about, where that philosophy comes from. And so people understand, because you're seeing what you're seeing. It's as simple as that. I mean, and if it comes to you as a past life, well, then I guess it is, and even if it wasn't, if it works where they get healed, so what? I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So Tom also works with the emotional code. You talked about emotions within this in the field, and he works with the emotional code. I'm sure that sounds pretty similar, just cloaked in a whole different, way of thinking.
There's a lot of commonalities amongst all the different modalities that we're talking about. And maybe it might be easier for the listeners to understand when we talk about those crystallized energies. It's almost like the emotional scabbing.
Yes.
Right? Wounded that you're trying to heal.
Yeah.
But it has to be cleaned off to really truly heal.
That's right. And what's interesting about crystallized energies is they get heavier and heavier the longer the wound is not addressed.
Absolutely.
Right? And so it will manifest in the body as chronic conditions. And if it's there long enough in a lifetime, it will actually get heavy enough to become a disease, right? And so when these crystallized energies are cleared, we're clearing potential diseases and imbalances in the physical body. And I tell you, more times than once, someone has said to me, how did you know that I had a knee issue? And I'm like, well, I was shown that. And then their knee issue, that was just a chronic irritating knee problem, seems to vanish for them. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, which is why I always say, you don't need to believe in what I'm talking about. You determine that when you're done with your session, if it served you or not.
Absolutely.
So the chakras, there are many different systems concerning chakras in the world, depending on the framework they come from, whether it's Hinduism or Buddhism or Chinese medicine. They're all different, and they have different teachings that go along with them. In the practice that I use with shamanism, now not all shamanism uses chakras,
right?
But the Peruvian shamanism does use chakras, and they believe actually there are 9 chakras. And in my personal practice, what I've been taught by my guides is that there are 10 chakras. So I work within a 10 chakra system. So the chakras are really balls, or I should say, they're referenced as wheels of energy, but I see them as balls of light. And they align in your body, one at the crown or the top of your head, one at your forehead, one at your throat, your heart, your stomach, your abdomen, and then at the base of your spine. Then that's basically the mainstream chakras. It's the crown, the third eye. Crown is our connection with source. Third eye is our intuitive self. The throat is communication, listening to ourselves, hearing ourselves, listening to Source or God, and speaking to God or Source and others. The heart is self-love and self-compassion, which is where we learn to give that to the world and to others. The stomach is personal power. The sacral is creativity, intimacy, relationships. The root is basically our basic instincts and our physical being. And so these are energy centers. They each have something to teach us, to challenge us with. It is the energy of the soul interfacing with the physical body so that we can have a human experience.
I know I'm a big Edgar Casey fan. I know you are as well, Gwen. And Casey wants, he's the sleeping prophet. For those who don't know, he did over 14,000 readings. He would go into a trance and give health readings. He would give prophecy. Many of the things you even see on the History Channel today, he did. And getting to this point about the chakras, he did say to one individual about how many chakras are there, and because they said there's 7, correct? And he said, well, there's actually 12 according to him. He goes, and they go, what's the other ones? He goes, why would I tell you the other ones? You're not even using your 7. And
That's right.
and so so I guess there is a sense of having to educate yourself, get yourself to the point where you are using those 7, and then the other ones can come along as you advance in your understanding. And even from a deep science perspective, I really believe that obviously the allopathic type medicine, you go into the doctor's office for an issue and they got generally 3 things they can do for you. 1, they give you a pill. 2, they give you an injection. Or 3, they cut you open. And from a spiritual point of view, clearly we're not cutting anybody open, and we're not giving them injections, and we're not giving them medicine. But we're just trying to work with those energy fields that are around the body that affect all the third body, the physical body, in such a negative way, or sometimes positive, as the case may be. And I think that's where there's a bit of a disconnect, and I think Tom will probably talk a little bit about that, having a regular MD looking at something, and they've never been trained in anything like you have, and I don't expect them to be. Hopefully they have an open mind and listen, but if it can't be seen, because all this is mental, and if it cannot be seen, they don't necessarily jump into it 2 feet. But the wind cannot be seen, but you can feel it and see the effects of the wind. Look at the hurricane that came on shore here recently and destroyed things. Can't see it, but there's certainly a force there. And I think if people keep that in mind, I think that's helpful. Tom, you got something to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, you look at traditional medicine, it was always based on the physical structures. And you see a lot of folks making the shift now to integrative medicine, and they talk mind body, but they're still missing the third component of spirit. And until they get all 3 pieces pulled together, then they're going to see the quantum jumps in their treatments. But it's a slow road. But people are on the right road. They're starting to open up to even having this discussion, which I know when I started in these fields, that wasn't even an option. If you dared open your mouth about this stuff, you'd be shunned. So we've come a long way in that whole category, just being able to have this conversation, podcasts like this.
And, all 3 of us we're all well-educated people. So we didn't, come to this. It took a while for each one of us to find our own journey to this spot where we can explore these things, try to validate them, and then try to put it into effect for people who need that. And so I guess the question I would have is, we always ask the interesting question, what kind of service did you do, or your interaction with one of your clients that stands out as, wow, that was like, one of my grade A pieces of work, something really positive that occurred as you have had all these years of, doing this kind of work? What was that one that stood out and you went, wow, that was really cool?
Well, there have been so many, but not only do I do healing work, I also do workshops. I teach a medicine wheel program that's a year-long program. And I started last year, in 2019, I started doing shamanic healing circles. And I had two of my students come who also have their own practice. So we had 3 shamans in a group of 6 individuals who would work on healing one individual at a time, and the other people in the group would support that healing while it was happening. And we had a woman in the group who had had a falling out with her son, and she hadn't been able to see her grandson in over 3 years. And she had come specifically to that circle to heal whatever that was, the rift between her son that was causing the rift between her and her grandson. And so it was her turn on the table, and she had her healing session, and we all took a 15-minute break, and she came back into the room after the break. Well, actually, I heard her cheering. I heard this cheering happening in the other room. And she came back in and she said, "My grandson texted me on my break." And so it was like, for whatever reason, that particular group really needed to have sort of that proof that something actually was happening in this session. And there are just so many, and so many of the healings that happen, I don't ever hear about.
Right.
And sometimes I'm glad not to hear about it, because I don't want my ego to be involved. And this work does not come through me. You know, I laugh at myself. I say I'm basically an extension cord. That whatever this energy is, very much like Reiki, it comes through me. And I'm only an extension cord. I'm only a tool. Like I'm only a tool. Right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I don't always know the impact of it.
Right.
I do know that a lot of people will send me emails and say that they have been deeply impacted by it.
Right.
So.
Well, you said something about Reiki. Just for the folks that don't know what Reiki means, they may have heard of it but don't know what it means. That's just a Japanese name for Rei. The first part, R-E-I, is related to God or universal energy, and the Kai or Chinese Qi. Sometimes you might hear that in martial arts, and it's related to the light or energy that somebody has. So it's really about God energy. In the Christian world, it's about laying on of hands. You get 3 elders, it's in the Bible, if you get sick, you go see the elders and they're laying on hands where, 2 or 3 are with you, so am I. It's really talking about that kind of energy, channeling that through, and typically through your hands, as these are sub-chakras, your palms, and it comes through that way. And people certainly do feel that. There's a misconception about Reiki, I think, in the American system. They just simply think it's some kind of voodoo or devil worship or whatever the case may be, when in fact it's just a Japanese name, or the same thing as laying on of hands at the church. And I want to make that clear to people. It's not anything negative. And for those that are in the energy work, we know that automatically. But for those who don't, they probably need a little bit of that background. So when we're talking some of the lingo, there's people that have never heard of it, just driving around the car listening to this, and some may be very advanced and may disagree with what I just gave as a definition, but hey, it's pretty close. So, we go from there. So Tom, do you have something on that?
I think you've explained it well. I know locally I've heard many people over the years shy away from it out of fear. There's some kind of black magic, as you said, a voodoo-ish kind of thing, and they just don't understand the place where it comes from.
Right.
I'm sure there are people out there that try to practice in a way that is non-conducive to the health of people. I guess I'll put it that way. So make sure you vet out your practitioners. Take the time to find out who they are and what they are before you sign up to do any of it.
That's right.
Well, keep in mind, Jesus was also accused of being a demon, working with demons, and well, that didn't work out for him. That narrative was false. And we see a lot of that in the news media these days. So I think people can understand that. And so that's important to know. Now, let me ask you this. Some people think that you do get into, I'll call it scary things. Is there something that you came across, some scary event that you would want to explain or tell people, or maybe give them a word of caution, or whatever you think you need to talk about? But everybody always asks me that, so I thought I would ask you.
Yeah, well, to be a shamanic practitioner, means that you sign up to work with energies, both energies that are here on Earth and energies that are in the in-between and energies that are in heaven. I mean, there's all these sort of varying degrees of energy. We have relationship with them. And one of the things that, I've worked on for years and been trained in for years is, being a seer, where I can see the invisible world as well as I can see the everyday world. And so, in working with clients, they bring energies. We all have energies around us, right? Just like we all have friends around us. We have friends that are wonderful, and then we may have a couple of friends that may be a little questionable. Maybe their, motives aren't that great. Maybe they're, the drinking buddy that you go out with. Or, we have all these kinds of relationships, some that are beautiful and some that are not so, and some that may even, keep you down. And so we see this in the spirit world and in reality. And then we have relationships with the beautiful, with archetypes, with Jesus, with angels, with, our grandmother who passed, who we love so much. So we always have these relationships happening. So in shamanism, one of the things that we work on is if you've had a trauma, have you, in that resonance or that vibration of that wound, have you attracted a like energy? Because that's a law in the universe. Like attracts like. Right. So I'm attracting beautiful things that are within me, and I'm also attracting the wounded things, the trauma, as an opportunity to heal it, to become aware of it, and to grow out of it and transform it. And so part of the work that I do in a healing session is looking to see if there are energies in your energy field attached to you that aren't serving you. I always use this example. Whales swim in the ocean, in the salt water of the ocean, and barnacles will adhere and attach to their skin. And they have this shared experience together. And if that whale all of a sudden had this instant evolutionary leap and could swim now in fresh water, those barnacles would drop off because they wouldn't be able to survive. So energies like this organically drop off as we grow and evolve and become more whole. And we can hire an energy healer or a shamanic practitioner, and they can help us make a faster healing or a faster sort of evolutionary leap. And those energies that have attached to you around trauma or drug addiction or deep depression, and there are many reasons why they attach to these like resonances, they also organically drop off, or they drop off faster with the help of the healing technician.
So if somebody would say, well, how do you actually do this? I mean, if I come to your practice, there's going to be smoke floating around. Am I going to have to get dressed in some kind of a costume? I mean, they get all these wild ideas in their mind to maybe put them at ease. How do you actually go in to see what's around them? I mean, what kind of a mind state do you have to be in? And then what do you expect from them? Do they just sit there, or do they need to be in some kind of a meditative state? Or, if I was going to be your patient today, Lord knows I probably need it, but if I was, what can I expect?
So it's almost like going to see a life coach or a spiritual counselor. You don't have to come in any particular state. I often will ask clients, just notice what's bubbling up from inside of you before you come for the day or two beforehand. And so what do I do to prepare? Well, I've got a very healthy meditation practice, and I do a lot of clearing myself, a lot of healing work for myself, because a mechanic, a race driver has a mechanic, right, to make sure that the engine of his car is going to run so he can win the race. Well, I'm a tool, and so I need to keep that tool clear. And so what I do, I take very seriously and very responsibly. So I'm always doing my own work, my own awareness building, my own transformational shift on the inside. So, with the energies that come, I had about 6 months ago, I had had a client scheduled, and I'm preparing, I'm doing a little meditation. I prepare anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour before I see a client. And so during that prep time, a woman comes in. Now she's a spirit. She comes in and she says to me, and her hair is wild, and she's wearing this like blue gown, and she's crazy. And she goes, "I am the wild woman." And she was. And, she had a lot to say. And I finally had to say, listen, you have to stay outside my office for a minute. When you're, whoever it is to you, whenever she comes, you can then come into the session. But you are way in the way right now. And I have to get ready to do this. Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out that it was her grandmother who had died, who in the final months and weeks of her life had lost her mind. And I described exactly what she looked like, exactly who she was. And she had come to be part of the healing. And it was an ancestral healing. And it wouldn't have been able to happen and unfold unless she had been present for that. And she had been in her energy field. Her grandmother had stayed with her. Instead of going into the light, she hopped on board with her granddaughter, and so before a session, I don't know who will show up. It used to be that they would show up sometimes at night to me. They would let themselves know whether it was great energy or whether it was not so great an energy. Mm-hmm. And I learned boundaries about that, Mm-hmm. And I have a certain place in my house that they can come if they need to tell me something. If they need to show up personally, I have a place that they can come. They often will send off the fire alarm in my house, so I know I need to pay attention. So these energies are very important. Our ancestors come back, and to have an intermediary to help them. I often do what is called in the mediumistic world as mediums. I do a lot of psychopomp, which is therapy with the dead, to help them move on, to help them heal.
Right.
So I have many clients when a client comes in, not just one.
Right. And I think, that concept might be a little much for some people who can't see, and I'll call it past the veil. There's a good book out there. It's called The Veil, as a matter of fact, by Blake Healy. He's a minister. I think he's a Baptist minister. The last I knew, he was in Georgia, wife, children, all that stuff. And I would encourage people who want to learn about that to read that. It's a real short book. You can do it in 2 evenings, I believe. But he gave a really good definition in that book. He said, it's, driving down in a car, you're looking through the windshield to see the road. He goes, but when you're seeing into the veil or past the veil, imagine yourself looking at the windshield rather than through it. And he described that. And I think that was a really good for people who are trying to figure out how people do this, how mediums, psychics, whatever it is, do this, see beyond the veil. He described it pretty well. I don't know if you have a way you describe it to people. I mean, if you were naturally gifted as a child, I know you have some Native American in your bloodstream there, and just how that came about and so forth.
Yeah, the first time I saw spirit, I was 6 years old. I had gone to an elder aunt's house who I'd never met, and her husband had died. So my mother and I went to help her with all of that. And the room I slept in it was a big old rambling house. And the room I slept in had no curtains on the windows. And so when I woke up in the middle of the night, the street lights were streaming into the room. And the room was full of maybe 20 to 24 people dressed in clothing from like the 1900s. Of course, I didn't know that it was the 1900s then because I was only 6, but they were in very old-fashioned clothes. And I could see all of them, and they were telling me that they had been in a train accident. And I had no idea what I was supposed to do, and I fell back to sleep. But, and it wasn't a dream. Mm-hmm. You don't remember dreams like that from 6. I mean, it's just so crystal clear. That was the first time I saw spirit. Mm-hmm.
Were you able to ever track that down to find out where the train wreck was or anything like that?
I have tried, mm-hmm. and it's funny because my sister told me the town probably about 2 years ago, and then I sort of like never got back to it. Now I've forgotten the name of the town again, so I think I need to get in touch with my sister. But yeah, the thing is
you think those people are still wandering at this
they
point?
definitely were still wandering. Yeah.
So if you were going to get a team or something together and try to help move those people on, into the light, because I always tell people there's just basically two different kinds of dead folks. You got the dead folks that go through the light and they're perfectly fine, and then the ones that kind of go into the gray. They don't pass through because they feel like they've got something to do, business that's not yet completed. They want to communicate to somebody, and I call that the gray, because you got the light. I call it the gray, and because I tell people it's kind of like, like watching an old black and white movie, or Leave It to Beaver or something like that, that old black and white stuff. And it's kind of in that, looks the same as every place else, but it's, and they get a little lost and they get to bumping around and they tend to repeat things and, those residual energies cycling around and that sort of thing. But some of them you can talk to, but I don't know. I'll let you go ahead and explain from your perspective how that works.
Yeah. Well, there are many traditions that talk about it. In shamanism, we call it the middle world, the in-between, right? In between here and heaven or home, whatever you want to call that. It's been called the bardo, purgatory. I mean, we're very familiar with that space.
Right.
And it's not made up just of, people that are confused. It's made up of people with vendettas, with drug addictions, with issues, with,
right.
All kinds of things, which is why, as a medium and shamanism being blended together, we deal with that and we can help people with that, even those who feel bent on, their rage, right? We can help them to lovingly move forward.
Now, how would you, let me interject for a second, because it brings me to a question that I get asked a lot. How would you tell the difference between somebody who's really got a rage and they're really upset with somebody else or somebody's in their house or whatever, and that kind of a entity versus a demon? Are they one and the same in your opinion, or are they have like situations? What's your take on all that?
Yeah. A demon is quite different.
Mm-hmm.
And I have dealt with ancestral energies.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I came into my practice, my office, was an ancestral energy. And it was very interesting because the client's grandmother came. And the first thing she said to me, she said, "I take responsibility." And I had no idea what she was talking about. And what I felt was, she said, "I take responsibility." And I thought, well, she's taking responsibility for whatever this wound is in the client. And so this must be an ancestral thing. And then the grandfather came and said, "I also take responsibility." So the ancestors were coming to take responsibility. And I didn't know what it was. I started to work with my client, worked with her maybe 3 or 4 sessions. And then our 4th session, during she was sharing, and during the middle of her sharing, she popped forward and got dead silent, and her whole face changed. Her eyes got bigger and rounder, and she looked like a completely innocent child. And she just looked at me, and I knew what I was looking at, but I'm like, am I really looking at that?
Sure.
And the minute I had that thought, now it was sustained probably for about 30 seconds, to the point where it was getting to be really like uncomfortable, like it was my job to sort of interject here. And so I called her name, and it broke, and she sort of jumped back into leaning back into the chair and began to laugh herself again. Well, that was interesting, and I knew what I was dealing with at that point. This was an ancestral energy that was powerful. So one of the homework assignments she got was to create an altar at home, a beautiful altar for her spiritual practice that she was going to begin. So I didn't see her for another 3 weeks or so. And so she came to see me, and I'm working with her, and my thoughts keep getting swiped. And I can't remember what I'm supposed to say. Well, I know that the energy is interrupting my thoughts. It doesn't want me to say these beautiful things to my client to help empower her. And that was my first clue, like, this might be beyond my scope of practice. And then my client said to me, she said, listen, I want you to know something. I set up my altar last night. And she said, those things you see in movies, they're real. I said, what do you mean? She said, you know how they show in the movies that your body, the person's body gets all contorted and they bend backwards and do all that stuff? She said, that's real because that's what happened to me last night. I was like, oh, okay. So I'm thinking to myself, all right, now I have a great resource. I have a great connection for you, a woman who, I didn't say that to her then, but I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to take her to someone who deals with, demonic possession.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what I did. And it was a very gentle way of moving her into that reality or that idea, which took not only suggestions in that first appointment, but then a couple of phone calls afterwards as we sort of ended our relationship and she moved into a relationship with someone who's more qualified.
Gotcha. Well, I know, Tom, you grew up Catholic and, so a lot of the purgatory, limbo, that's common knowledge, as well as, you hear about demons. Well, even Paul in the Bible, said, our fight's not with the flesh and blood, but with basically, principalities, spirit, if you will. And I think there's something to that, obviously, because they're not writing in the Bible for fun. They're trying to tell you something. So I don't know. Did you ever grow up listening to all that, Tom?
Oh, yeah, we had those same type of storylines, if you will. I have a question for you, Gwen. For those that maybe aren't buying the whole idea of entities and demons and whatnot, given traditional medicine, traditional psychiatry, some people would say that's just a mental health issue.
Mm-hmm.
How do you differentiate from your perspective the two?
I don't think.
Okay.
Someone comes in and says, I think I need some work. And I say, let's have a healing. And if it's a demon, if it's, your uncle who raped you 4 times and just can't leave you alone, let's just deal with it. I generally don't use that terminology. I don't talk about, unless I have to, I won't even really tell a client that I'm removing a heavy energy. There's so much around it in mainstream that is just simply terrifying and not true. I mean, I think it's a rarity that people are possessed, really and truly. I think that people deal with a lot of heavy energies based on their traumas and their wounds. I really come from a place in my shamanic practice from love, not from fear. Even this energy that came forward presenting as this, like literally this energy was like afraid, terrified that I was going to rid them of where they were, right? Even, for me, it's all from God. I don't care what it is. It's all from God. It's just a lower idea of God, right? A lower expression that hasn't been illuminated, that has the potential to be illuminated, right? And so, yes, I go in with very firm boundaries, but ultimately with love. Ultimately with love. So I'm very careful with the language that I use, right? And I also believe what the Peruvian shamans believe, which is it's all the beauty way. None of it is accidental. All of it has come to teach us, to strengthen us, to evolve us. That's why we came to Earth. This is really a tough place. This is not easy. This is where soldiers come. Anybody here has said, listen, I'm willing to do the hard work.
Right. It's very much a cause and effect place to be. It's hot, cold, sweet, sour, that kind of thing. That's how we learn, is those contrasts in life. When you have a contrast, you learn very quickly. If you were just on the other side, which was all love, it would be much harder to learn. But here you learn so very quickly. And so I think that's fantastic. Now we're going to put your information up on the website at www.themetaphysical-mysteries.com. But if somebody wanted to find a practitioner, maybe you said you were in North Carolina, and they want to find somebody local, is there like some place they could go to maybe find those folks, or are they all just hidden away in some corner?
Well, there's some truth that they are hidden away, but I'll tell you now with Zoom, and I was doing Zoom and Skype and phone sessions long before COVID ever came around. But with healing, and this is a concept for people, that we're really learning now and having the opportunity to learn because of Zoom, that you don't have to be in person. Energy is energy. It's not constrained or confined by physical or physicality or by distance. So I'm available, so I'm always going to sort of toot my horn first.
Absolutely.
But I also toot the horn of other practitioners. My teacher of the Peruvian way said, the world needs a shaman on every corner. The world needs a healer on every corner. So what do? Go into Google or whatever your search engine is and look up shamanic practitioner. Energy healer, Reiki healer, and fall into the faith that whoever it is that you're supposed to work with, they're going to pop up on that screen.
Right.
You'll end up falling in the lap of somebody that's meant just for you.
Yeah, and I'll reinforce what you said about, being able to do things by distance. Because we always are used to going to a regular doctor, they're taking your blood pressure and temperature and all that sort of thing. And that's right there in person, and it's working that third body, but we're not working the third body. We're working that, the first body, that spiritual body. And, science-wise, we've taken human cells in New York and the same human cell in LA, and if you stimulate one, the other one also vibrates at the exact same time. Well, how the heck does that happen? People are just mesmerized by that, and truly it proves that, energy is energy, and we're all connected at the speed of thought. And so this is how people that are in the energy medicine world or energy health world, whatever you want to call it, are able to do things from a far, far distance. And I think that's really important for people to understand. And there is science that have backed it up. Tom, you got anything to throw in on that?
Yeah, that's a whole couple of sessions in itself, understanding quantum physics and such, and probably a topic for a different day, but we are evolving. The science books are being rewritten as we speak. Things that we learned in high school for chemistry and
such. Star Trek come alive.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a device that looks like one of the Dr. McCoy's tricorders. In 8 seconds, it tells me what's going on with your biofield. It's just amazing how far we've come.
So I think they're taking that shamanic concept, and rather than they're shortcutting it a bit, so you don't have to study for years and years. You go buy this tricorder and you're waving it in their field, and what you do naturally, they're trying to artificially do now with scientific instruments, which is really fascinating. It'll be interesting to see the nuances, because the shaman will get a nuance, several nuances that I don't know that the mechanical machine will get, but I think it'll give you the generality of what the problem is, where it may be located, and how to get rid of it. And I know Tom gets a chance to do that all the time.
It's trying to blend the science with the nuances of the human experience. I think that's the success key. It's not one over the other necessarily. At some point, it'll be probably more human than machine. But for today, to make that transition from where we've been into tomorrow, I think the machine needs to be there for people to accept it. Which I guess that would be a question I'd have for you, Gwen, kind of, in thought. If I've been listening to this podcast and I'm on the fence going, sounds interesting, but I'm not sure if I'm buying this yet. What would you say to me?
I would say that experience speaks louder than anything. And have an experience. Do your own research. It's like what people say about ghosts. You're never really going to believe there's a ghost until you actually have an experience.
I can attest to that.
Absolutely.
Because I choose not to, but I could spend all day trying to convince you and give you more information and more research and more proof and more statistics. But that's not going to be as powerful as an experience.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, and Tom and I both come from an investigative background in law enforcement, so it took us a long time to get to this point where things that people have told us and so forth that we actually came to believe. Because one of the introductory things that I got told as a investigator, I was asked to do a ghost investigation because they knew I was an investigator. And so a couple of folks that had problems in a building they owned, they said, hey, we got a problem, and you're a cop, can't you come and do this? And I'm like, yeah, what the hell? I give it a try. I'm not afraid of anything. I'll go give it a try. And so I did, and I was successful at it. And then somebody else asked, and somebody else asked, and pretty soon I said, you know what, I really think I need to go back to school. And if I'm going to get good at this, I really need to have that background and so forth. And you really discover a lot about yourself in that process of trying to acquire knowledge that's going to be helpful in what you've stumbled into. And so that was fun. It was fun to do that. And I think once you understand that all these things are truly energies, they're not like some horned devil with a pitchfork waiting to get you. And you just understand the energies are energies, and you need to be able to nuance that into a good space, and that's good. And because people do ask me, hey, if somebody dies, do they know everything? I said, no, if they were stupid when they were alive, they're stupid when they're dead. It's the same person, And if they go through the light, they're going to get a little bit of an enlightenment in that process. But if they hang around, that 20% that kind of hang around, they'll just be the same old Joe Schmo that they were. They just happen to be out of body. And that's what I say that's what goes bump of the night, the ghosts, if you will. And they're wandering about, and some of them don't even know that they're deceased, which is a story for another day. But especially when you get to the battlefields down in your Civil War battlefields down in your area, in Gettysburg and all that, and we can talk about that stuff another day, but they don't even know that they're past. You have to convince them that they're actually gone. And so that's always fascinating. Mm-hmm. So, and then they have equipment. You can actually talk to them now, and from a scientific perspective, you can help them move, and that's pretty cool. So, mm-hmm. But I think we've covered most of the things that I was interested in. And Tom, do you have anything else that?
No, I think it's well covered. I appreciate it. Taking the time to share your knowledge and your experiences with everyone. It's definitely an insight into a different world that most people don't have any experience with. And I think your recommendation of give it a try and have the experience and then make a judgment really carries a lot of weight for folks. Hopefully they'll take you up on that thought. Yeah.
And let me know that we barely scratch the surface of what shamanism is. Right. If you ever, have a sense that you want to call me back to do another one, I'd love to do it on talking about journeying and how people can almost instantly take a shamanic tool and begin to use it the second they leave the screen. That can potentially shift everything for them.
Right.
Absolutely. And there is one book I would like to recommend to people.
Sure.
And it's by an author named Michael Newton, who has written 2 books. One is the first book, and I recommend you read them in order. The first one is Journey of Souls, mm-hmm. and the next one is Destiny of Souls. And it talks all about, through empirical data, it's basically sessions he's had with clients under hypnosis, of what the experience the soul goes through once it passes from physical life or through death, and what happens to the soul in between. Once they die, what happens in the spirit realm? It's absolutely fascinating work. And so it's a great read, and it's easy to read.
That's one of my go-to references as well. When I get folks that are just getting into the field, and I reference Michael Newton's book, Journey of Souls. Yeah, get in and see that, and then get the second one if you can. I tell them to get it in an audio form because it's a pretty good sized book. I mean, if you're a reader and you like to really hold on to something, that's fine. But a lot of us are very busy, so audio books really help. Get that information into your brain pretty quickly. And yes, that is. Yeah, and also that the Veil going along with that, those are 2 books I recommend all the time. And boy, I do not recommend books. I mean, I usually don't because I don't like to get recommended to. So, but I might read 100 and recommend 1. That's just right. How I do it, because I don't want to waste anybody's time, and I'll just want them to know if I do reference something, it's really good. And so Gwen, I'm really glad you agree with that perspective, So, and for guys and gals that are listening to this, if you do need a shaman, I'm telling you from personal experience, I've watched Gwen do some pretty amazing things, and she is top of the heap as far as I'm concerned. As it relates to shaman, she's realistic. I mean, the woman's got a master's degree. She's, just certified in all kinds of things, was a teacher and, social worker ability, all those clinical things that you need to have for the background, but then really taken her life and went into this field in a very forthright manner. I know you studied up off the Cape in Massachusetts, where Tommy's from, and then you moved down into the Carolinas, and hey, that's a beautiful area and so forth. But I will just give my 2 thumbs up
Thank you.
for Gwen if anybody needs a shaman. And if she, like I say, if she does not feel comfortable in whatever arena you're looking at, she's got a network of people to reach out to try to fit you with just the right person. So, very good. Well,
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being on, Gwen.
Thank you.
I appreciate it very much. And we will be in touch, I'm sure. And we'll put your website up and your numbers, so if people need you, they can get a hold of you. And I'm sure we'll have you back for the other experience that you talked about, which will be great. So, and for those of us who are here at the podcast, Tom and I will be back at some point with another really neat guest. I think the next one we've got up online is a leader of a paranormal group, also from your state, as a matter of fact. And so I think we're going to put some video up with that, so people get to see some really interesting things as they have roamed around your state and tried to deal with some of these things we touched just briefly on today. So other than that, from the folks here at the Metaphysical Mysteries, we'll talk to you all later. Have a great day.
Thank you. Okay, good stuff.